Welcome back to That's Life with John Carver. My guest today is Kim Bell. Kim, thanks for being on the show
Thanks
today.
for having me, John.
Appreciate it. Kim is a speech-language pathologist, and today's theme is really designed to help all of us understand how important it is to catch speech or language issues with young children so that they don't have to struggle with these issues as they get older. As a child, I had a major stuttering issue, still do from time to time, and I know that pain, I know that frustration, how essential it is to address the issues early in life. So I've known Kim for a number of years, so I thought it'd be really nice for her to come in and share some of her expertise in why it's so important to identify these issues, and then maybe also address some of the signs that I think some parents miss. So Kim, thank you for being on the show.
Great, thanks for having me.
Sure. So start us off with maybe some of your own background and why you got into the field, and then kind of share if parents are normally even aware or able to identify some of these speech issues.
Well, I got into the field because I wanted to go into a helping field. So that was my passion, in life, is I wanted to do a helping profession, and I think I found my calling in the field of speech-language pathology, and I think you'll find that most speech pathologists really go into the field for that reason. So we're generally very helping people that really like working with young people. So those that work with early intervention children and infants and toddlers and young children generally have a passion for that population. So, but I think that early intervention is really important, and it's been something that has been important in my life in working with children.
So a typical parent don't know, they don't even maybe are able to identify these signs that some of these kids have. Some signs are obvious. Some kids may have a lisp, and that you can spot. But we've talked in the past about other signs that may be ignored, or I know some parents thought that the child would outgrow certain things. Can you kind of give us a little flavor on what some of those signs might be with some kids?
Right. There was a really interesting study that was done recently that came out. They interviewed speech pathologists, and they did a study and found that 60% of the clients of the speech pathologists, their clients didn't realize that their children had a speech and language delay. So they weren't even recognizing that their children, when they brought them in, had a speech and language delay. So parents are not recognizing these early signs of a speech and language issue. So it's important for us as a speech and language pathologist to get the word out and teach these signs of things to recognize. So there are early signs that we can teach the public to recognize.
What are maybe 3 or 4 of those signs that maybe a parent watching the show today can say, wait a minute, my kid does that. I didn't realize it was an issue until Kim just said it. What are a couple of those things?
Well, some of those things, if you have, if you're talking about in an infant, would be things like not making eye contact at an early age, not babbling in a typical developmental way. If you have a toddler, not starting to talk and say single words or not stringing words together. If you have a child that isn't articulating clearly or where other people can understand them. Of course, if you have issues with stuttering or prolonging the first sound of words, those kind of things are all signs that you may need to seek help.
This is not in our notes, but I'm curious, have you seen situations where some families or parents have thought that a child had a mental problem, but in reality it's just a speech problem?
Absolutely. I definitely have seen issues with that, and
Really?
And then there's just a lot of, like you said, they'll outgrow it. There's a lot of opportunities where families are told that they will outgrow it, even told by pediatricians and physicians that they will outgrow it, give them time. But unfortunately, now children are expected to do so much in kindergarten that there isn't a lot of time for them to outgrow it, because the demands are so high in kindergarten now. So there's not a lot of time to outgrow it if your expectation is that you are to be speaking in sentences by the time you're 2 and 3 years old. And if you're not, and you need to be pre-reading by 4 and reading by 5, there's not a lot of time to catch up. And if you're not articulating clearly and speaking in sentences when you go to kindergarten at 5, you've got a problem. So kids are really working hard to try to catch up, and so we really want to see them the earlier the better. 18 months, 2 years old.
Really?
We want to have them in therapy if we can get them that early.
So a parent after the show could potentially say, well, my child isn't babbling correctly, or they don't look at me when I'm talking or smiling or cooing or whatever terminology you guys use. That could be a sign that maybe we need to at least get an opinion of somebody in the field instead of a general doctor or somebody that's not an expert in that field.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
So when you have, again, I'm not a speech therapist at all, for the record, but is it true that typically boys have more of a struggle with speech than girls, or is that not the case?
It is true that in general, the incidence is more prominent in boys than girls, but it's not super significant. I mean, the incidence is more in boys than girls, but it's not like enough that we shouldn't be concerned about girls as well, that we don't say don't watch your girls as well, because we know certain disorders go undiagnosed in girls, like ADHD and things like that. Girls are being missed and misdiagnosed because people are not keeping good track on girls. So you don't want to say don't watch your girls as well.
Of course. No,
so
I'm not saying that at all.
Right. So but yeah, the incidence is definitely more prevalent for things like autism and different speech and language disorders, definitely in boys more than girls.
I'm wondering, and it's probably an obvious question and or statement, that there are a lot of adults walking around, and percentages I have no idea, I don't know how many thousands or hundreds, I have no clue, that if they would have seen somebody like you when they were kids, that they could potentially be much farther ahead in life, but something wasn't caught in time, something wasn't recognized. I can remember when I was in kindergarten, first grade, they would take me out of the class for, I can't remember, an hour a day to put me in these speech classes to help me speak better. That's a long story behind that. But anyway, some things, most of the kids, at least in my world, and adults these days, haven't had the opportunity to be treated or to be seen by a professional who can spot these things much faster than, like I said before, the average person out there. So catching treatment early is really critical, isn't it?
It really is. It really makes the difference, and it's unfortunate that there are people who haven't had the opportunity, and we do get adults that come back and seek treatment as adults because they have missed that opportunity, who come and say, I need help now. And we do treat things that adults are having trouble with that they didn't get help as children for things like executive functioning, which is a whole new avenue that speech pathologists are working on, are things like executive functioning covers things like organization, planning, sequencing, the things that fall under like how you function in your daily living. Speech pathologists are the professionals that help with those kinds of things. So we see those that are functioning in corporate America trying to pull their lives together and do those executive functioning type high-level brain skills. Speech pathologists are the ones that
Really?
target that.
You just shocked me there. Really?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not
so-
just what's coming out of your mouth, it's how
your
a
brain
person's functioning.
Yes, how your brain functions. And so we work on those kind of things too with adults, not just the early childhood things as well. So we do have adults that come back and see us for other things, not just.
So is it fair to say that even with a child and certainly with an adult, that it's at least part of the therapy that people like you do for other people, it's a rewiring of the brain?
Oh, definitely.
It's playing my terminology is playing mind games with your own brain.
It's definitely making pathways. It's making pathways. It's creating more effective pathways. Definitely making new motor plans.
Or shortcuts.
Shortcuts. Yeah, definitely.
Again, I'm not a speech pathologist.
Yeah, definitely making motor plans that are more effective.
Wow.
Just like if you had a stroke and you needed to create new pathways
Right.
for one part of the brain is damaged, you teach another part of the brain to pick up the pieces. So
that's very curious. So the brain's that complex that it can make a shortcut to go around a challenging area that's
Yes.
not as coherent or as fluid as other people's, and you can still function beautifully in the world using that shortcut.
Yes, and that what we see in young children is we call it that the brain is placid. That's the word that we use. And so the brain has more placidity when children are young. And so that's why we say between birth and age 7 to 9, generally kids have the most placidity in their brain. So you want to cram as much intervention as you can between birth and 9, if you can. Not that they don't make progress after that, but you want to hit it hard in those early ages and take advantage of those opportunities in the early stages if you can, because that's when you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And then, just like if you had a stroke in the first 3 to 4 months, you're going to get the most bang for your buck in intervention than you would at year 3 after a stroke in recovery.
And does that also equate to why it's so much easier for a child to learn another way to speak or a language?
Yes, absolutely.
You said that it's from birth to 9. What's the word you used?
Placidity.
Placidity.
Yes.
Placidity. So then after 9, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's much more difficult to learn new shortcuts? Explain now after age 9.
It's just more difficult. It's not that you can't, but it's more difficult to learn. It just takes the brain a little bit longer. It's just not that you can't. Just like it's harder to go to high school and learn a foreign language than it is to start teaching a foreign language to a child in kindergarten, and start teaching it in kindergarten and go all the way through the years in school.
Now, that's a very interesting thing you just said. So wouldn't it make sense then to start teaching foreign languages to kids 5 and 6 instead of 14, 15 years old?
Right.
So maybe the school systems around the United States need to hear some advice here.
Right.
I mean, really?
Right.
Doesn't it make a lot of sense?
Right.
So these kids that are have these speech concerns, speech challenges, and there's organizations across the United States that can help kids, certainly
Absolutely.
in that arena. But wouldn't you agree that these challenges that these kids have, if they're undiagnosed or not treated, that it can impact them socially in ways that are lifelong? Can you kind of talk a bit about those challenges that could impact a child's life if therapy isn't started earlier in their lives?
Absolutely. I mean, we get a lot of calls about children who are older, moving into the teen ages, who are having trouble socially and emotionally because of speech disorders and bullying and those kind of issues. So, we do take a lot of, older children coming in for therapy who want to work on things that, haven't been fully addressed or recovered from, that we try to help them with. And help them recover completely from, if possible, that maybe weren't addressed to the fullest ability. But it affects self-esteem.
Big time.
So, I mean, there just isn't any way around it that, a lot of times there's self-esteem issues that it's connected with socially and academically, and there just isn't any way around it that, a lot of times it goes hand in hand, but one of the things that I see, and I tell parents when they come in with their children, young, at like say age 3 and 4, the first thing that you see within a couple sessions is their self-esteem improve. It doesn't even matter whether their articulation or their language has improved. Just from coming and walking in the door and coming and having one-on-one therapy, they start feeling better about themselves because they know they're doing something to help themselves. The kids feel better automatically, and their self-esteem improves and they walk taller. And you can see it on their face. They start feeling better about themselves. They run out of the room and they're proud of themselves when they go back to their parents. And at the end of the session and go out to the lobby, and they feel good about themselves, and you can see it on their face that they know they're working hard at their issue, and it's one of the first things that we see.
I can remember when I was a kid in school, I was beat up quite a bit, got in some fights, picked on all the time because of my speech problems that I was having. And I'm curious to know, in your practice, in your experience, and the people that you know, if that is common, not uncommon, and the larger idea here is that young people, let me rephrase it, some young people tend to spot out that weak person, or that person with a struggle is a better way to say it, and they attack these kids in sometimes a very violent way, not only maybe a fight, but verbally, and the verbal
the teasing
abuse,
and stuff.
the teasing.
Fortunately, I have to say, we don't see it that much anymore.
Really?
I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to be, like when you and I grew up. I don't think it's as common as it used to be. There's a lot more tolerance. Children are mainstreamed from a lot earlier on, so children with special needs and disabilities are integrated into classrooms from a lot earlier on, and the kids grow up together, and so there's a lot more tolerance and integration, and I think that things are better than they used to be. They're not perfect by any means, but I think there is a lot better tolerance, and for the most part, that behavior is not tolerated. So I do think it's better. I mean, we have clubs like the Best Buddies Club that, are in the middle schools and the high schools that, support, one-to-one friendships between special needs and typical developing children, having one-to-one friendships. And so we do have those kind of clubs that support those friendships. And so, it's not cool to pick on somebody, at the high school because they have those kind of clubs. And you're not cool if you're picking on one of those kids. So I hope that, clubs like Best Buddies predict that by the year, in 20 more years they won't even need that club anymore. That it just won't be necessary to have a club like that. So I hope that that's the direction we're going.
So wouldn't you agree that some of the strongest kids have amazed you in a lot of ways, even though they have speech issues or they have challenges in a variety of areas? Can you talk a minute or two about your experience with some of these kids, how really strong they are?
Oh, my kids are the most resilient kids, I think. They're amazing. The families in general of special needs children are just amazing. The dedication that it takes to get through, the issues that children are dealing with, from anything from something mild, just the dedication it takes to doing your homework every week on top of the activities that you have and homework and, you know, activities with school and balancing life and babies and siblings and all that stuff. And, you know, I think it's important to keep in mind that families, you know, play a part of the whole dedication to the plan, but the children themselves are what are most impressive. They work hard and they want it and they work hard for it. So they're impressive.
2 questions and then we'll be done. We'll be out of time. The health insurance issue, should parents be the type that push for their insurance companies to step up and pay for some of this stuff? Or how would you talk to parents that are having these issues?
Well, some companies do pay for speech therapy, but you know there's a lot that don't, and so parents are having to pay privately for it, and you know they should be pushing with their employer, their health insurance to try to cover it. But you know what parents need to realize is that the longer they wait to get started with speech therapy, the bigger issue that you have and the longer it's going to take to remediate the problem. So, you know, early intervention is going to save you time and money in the long run. So it is more cost efficient to go ahead and start with something earlier, because you may be able to prevent something developing into something more later. So, and you know, it is more efficient to generally start with something, you know, on the earlier side, but definitely we need to be pushing insurance companies and employers to be advocating for speech therapy coverage for children.
If people want to get more information about speech challenges and where they can go to get more details about it, can you tell us about some websites that they can go to?
Sure. If they're looking for a speech pathologist that they can go to see, our national organization is the American Speech Language Hearing Association. They can find a provider in their area. That's www.asha.org, ASHA.org. And then if they're looking for signs and symptoms of a communication disorder, ASHA has on another website which is identifythesigns.org, and that's SIGNS, identifythesigns.org.
Kim Bell, thanks for being on the show today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much.
I hope you learned a thing or two about speech therapy and speech pathology, and maybe you can notice some signs, and if you see the signs, get some help. There's help out there for you. Thanks for watching the show, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.